Sunday. Wifey fly by my side. Green light, everything is going my way. Riding clean, living dreams. Just left the barber and I'm feeling like Midas. Heard him say, give him praise. What's in the water got you acting like this? Ain't a day go by that I don't try to thank the Lord up above. And if you wonder why I'm loving life, come close and I'll tell you what's up. Ask me how I'm doing, I'm blessed, yes. Living every moment, no regrets. Smile up on my face, I'm like, oh, yes, I'm blessed, yes, I'm blessed.
I'm blessed to have you tuned in to our program today, and I am grateful to have you with us in this hour. When one references the care industry in America, one should be talking about nurturing and feeding and loving fellow human beings. Instead, Barnard College history professor Pramila Natterson is inviting us to join her in this hour in an eye-opening reckoning with the care economy, from its roots in racial capitalism to its exponential growth as a new site of profit and extraction. That is a damning indictment to refer to the care industry in this country as a new site of profit and extraction. That is exactly what she believes, and that is at the epicenter of her work. And I'm delighted to have her on this program. Professor Natterson, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Tavis. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's my great honor to have you. The name of the book is called Care, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Once again, it's called Care, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Let me just start with that indictment that I laid out a moment ago, that it really is at the epicenter of your text. And we got an hour, so we got time to work this thing out, and I'm glad to have you. But let me just start with what your indictment is. Just lay out the indictment first, and then we'll of the care industry, that is, and then we'll work through this hour.
Well, I will say that, we often talk about care as a kind of a universal politics where we all are mutually invested in taking care of one another. But what I have found in my research is, in fact, there is a tremendous amount of profit that is being made, that has been made, from people's need to live to take care of themselves. And we see this historically, and we see it in the contemporary moment. Perhaps one of the best examples is during the pandemic. Mm-hmm. We spent $4.7 trillion as a country on pandemic spending. About $1.8 trillion of that went to individuals and families. The rest went to hospitals, to businesses, to schools, state and local governments. And I'll just give you one example from that. Mm-hmm. The company Regeneron, right, which made the antibody treatment for COVID, got $450 million from the federal government to develop the antibody treatment. Now, at the end of that, Regeneron holds the patent. Mm-hmm. And once the government purchased the doses that it wanted, Regeneron was able to charge 10 times what it cost to manufacture that antibody treatment. Cigna is one of the companies that made billions of dollars during the pandemic, $5.5 billion profit. United Healthcare made billions of dollars, $17 billion in profit in 2021. And those are the big examples, but in fact, we can look at everyday spending, the amount that people spend on child care, on health care, on housing, the things we need to survive, to live, to take care of ourselves, to take care of our loved ones. There has been a care crisis in this country, and the question that I'm asking is, how have people been able to deal with that care crisis in the absence of any kinds of government support? And it is primarily through the private market. Our need to care for ourselves has been privatized.
Mm. I'm glad you laid that out. That gives me a lot to work with, and now I know how to interrogate you for the rest of this hour, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do so. So let me just start with what you've said already, and there are a number of things we can pick apart in that, but I think the first thing I want to address is whether or not any of this surprised you. Now, it is arresting to hear it, It's shocking to hear it, and yet I'm not surprised to hear anything you just said. Wasn't surprised to read anything necessarily in your text, although I love the way you laid it out, and you give us a way to understand this better and wrap our brains around it. I guess the question is whether or not your critique, your indictment, your claim is really against the care industry or against capitalism, because everything you've just said now is how capitalism in this country works.
I think I've seen a real shift. I hear a little bit of an echo, by the way.
Mm-hmm. We'll get Miles to address that when we go forward. Yes.
Okay, so there's been a real shift in our country. Mm-hmm. So we can take the welfare system, for example, that was dismantled in 1996. Welfare used to provide a basic monthly income for poor single parents and their children. Mm-hmm. When it was dismantled, what we saw is the creation of services for poor families, but no direct assistance. Something like 5% of welfare dollars actually end up in the pockets of poor families. So where does the rest of the money go to? It goes to state governments. It goes to private companies that have been doing the administrative work of the welfare system. I'll just give you one other example. Maximus is one of the companies that has been taking care of healthcare services around the country. They have billions of dollars in state contracts to run the Affordable Care Act, child support enforcement, welfare to work programs, among other things. So these are state dollars that have been earmarked for poor people, for health care, and in fact this has been privatized. And so I think we have to ask ourselves, when we push for more federal spending or more state spending on health care, on child care, where are these dollars going? Are they actually going to the people who need them, or are they going to these for-profit companies that are making millions or billions of dollars?
There's a lot to interrogate in this hour. I want to talk about the issue of privatization. I want to talk about the government's complicity in this as I see it, and a great deal more. Just getting started in this hour, indicting our care industry. The book from Barnard College history professor Pramila Natterson is called Care, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
Escalade IQ. This the intro to the all-electric Cadillac, perfected like Zoom. And on a full charge, you get 450 miles without the stop. Haiku. This is what I do. Daddy fat intellect since 92. Linked all the way back, panoramic roof. Come with 24-inch rim standard. Ooh, why? Shawty don't kill him. Cadillac diamond in the back, cold chillin'. And when I'm on attack, on the track is no ceiling. Sky's the limit. You hear me? You hear me? Straight drop, no parachutes. Lay lines like a longitude and latitude. Dilly, beloved, clearly we're hustling. Bussin', truckin'. Cadillac.
For more on the Escalade IQ, visit Cadillac.com.
Available late 2024. GM estimate 450-mile range. On a full charge based on development testing and/or analytical projection. Consistent with the CHA 1634 revision 2017 MCT. Range subject to change prior to production. Annual rates may vary based on service factors, including ambience, temperature, terrain, battery age, and condition loading, and how you use and maintain your vehicle.
Environmental justice, pollution, and climate. In Los Angeles and across America, people of color are suffering and dying from disproportionate health impacts on a planet that has less than 10 years to prevent irreversible damage. Heat illnesses, respiratory illnesses, water-related illnesses, food system impacts, insect-related diseases, black maternal health, and mental health effects. As the impacts of climate change mount, millions of vulnerable people, our people, are going to bear the brunt of these extreme environmental events, which will likely lead to forced displacement, loss of cultural identity, and other related risks. These realities are as real as rain. Stay tuned to KBLA Talk 1580 for more details about the most progressive multimedia and live events campaign any black media outlet has ever undertaken to combat the climate catastrophe. Experts, events, empowerment. It's all on the way from unapologetically progressive KBLA Talk 1580. We don't black down. We level up.
Level up, 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 level up.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
You tuned in to Tavis Smiley and Pramila Natterson, professor of history at Barnard College, author of a new book called Care, The Highest Stage of Capitalism. Just getting started really in this hour, sort of unpacking what's really going on in our care industry. It ain't just about loving and nurturing and feeding. There's a whole lot of money being made, which shouldn't surprise any of us. But it really is arresting to get inside this book and to see what's really happening in our so-called care system. It's a four-letter word that starts with C, but it ain't about care. It's about cash. That's really what's happening here, and Professor Natterson is sort of unpacking that for us in this hour. Let me come back to a few things we were talking about earlier and just get a better understanding of this. So when I got into your text and understood this better, and I've kind of understood this, from a distance, but you really put a spotlight on this. Here's my question about the way government funds Regeneron or any of the other companies, Cigna, others who produce these kinds of antibiotics or vaccines or whatever it is. So to your earlier point, Regeneron, if I heard you correctly, was given like $450 million from the government to develop this product during the pandemic. So the government gives them $450 million to do this. And then they turn around, to your point, and they sell it back to us, us being the people, for 10 times what it cost them to produce it. That's called capitalism. That's called profit, and I get it. But that $450 million was an investment. It was an investment. And my question is, why, when the government takes our money and gives it to Regeneron, that $450 million, shouldn't we get our money back when they start making a profit? So why do they get the $450 and get to make billions selling it back to us for 10 times what it cost them to make it? Why don't we get? I mean, why is the government? Why do they do it this way? I mean, that frame seems so wrong to me. I'm stunned by this. Talk to me about that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And the federal government did, in fact, get a certain number of doses through that contract for the first year, right? Mm-hmm. But the second year, the pandemic continued, as you know. The second year, we actually paid for additional doses. So in a sense, you could say, yes, we did get something in exchange for that $450 million investment. But the fact is that Regeneron then was able to develop something with federal dollars and continue to make a huge amount of profit. And the thing about it for me is not that there shouldn't be any profit. We do live under a capitalist system. But this antibody treatment costs $240 to manufacture. Mm-hmm. Regeneron was selling it for $2,100. So that's a profit of $1,860 per dose. Man. And so those are the kinds of questions I have about how tax dollars are being spent, about who's making a profit, about where that profit goes. And it's with Regeneron, it's with the healthcare industry. Hospitals, as you know, got billions of dollars during the pandemic, mm-hmm. but it's also about welfare dollars and money that is supposed to be targeted to poor people. Mm-hmm. Just one other example I could give you is in the state of Mississippi, there was a scandal recently you may have heard about it, but the Mississippi head of the Department of Human Services, his name is John Davis, used state welfare money to enrich himself and his friends. He went on vacation, he purchased vehicles, and he did this by funneling money through a nonprofit in the state that was run by some friends and supporters. And so he had influence on how that money was spent. Mm-hmm. Millions of dollars went to friends for speaking fees. There was one friend of his who developed an app to send Bible verses to troubled teens. It was $77 million.
This is
nearly equal.
Let me cut in right quick. I'm sorry. This is the guy. This is the story that Brett Favre was connected to, the former NFL quarterback.
That's
yes?
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It was $77 million, which is nearly equal to a year's worth of state welfare funds in Mississippi.
Right.
And so, I think we as people who care about poverty, who care about care. This book is a sobering assessment, I will say that, about profit extraction from care. It wasn't easy for me to write, but it really does come from a place of hope and possibility. The core question I'm asking is, how can we create a more caring and just society? That's what I want to get at.
Nope.
And I don't think we're there yet.
Nope. I want to get there. I want to get there too, and we'll get there in this hour. But we ain't there. To your point, we ain't there yet. I got some more interrogating to do before we get to the hope and possibility. I'm all for hope. My friend Jesse Jackson says, "Keep hope alive." We'll do that for another 40 minutes. But I want to keep this. I want to continue this interrogation first. So let me ask another question about. I'm still stuck on all this money that we give to these companies to develop these products, and they make all this profit thereafter, and they own the patent. So, as you know, because you cover this and write this book, oftentimes patents are shared. There are companies that work with other companies, and they share the patent. I'm still pressing on this issue. We give them the money to develop it. Why can't we share the patent with Regeneron? We being the U.S. government. Why can't we share the patent? Why do they own that outright?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a really good question, and not very many people are asking that question. I want us to ask questions like that because I feel like when the U.S. government makes an investment in something, the U.S. taxpayers, the people of the United States, should be benefiting from that.
It's our money.
Not CEOs.
It's our money. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Not stockholders, but in fact, ordinary people.
Yeah. The issue of privatization, you put your finger on this already, and at the end of the day, I find let me just stand back for a second. I find at the end of the day, having done this for quite a while now, that, and it wasn't like this when I started my career, a few decades ago, but every conversation I have these days about any sort of social ill, any sort of public dysfunction, eventually, almost every one of those conversations, Professor Natterson, circles around, weaves its way into a dialogue, a conversation about privatization. I don't care if it's care. I don't care if it's schools. I don't care if it's prisons. I mean, think about this. Every conversation I have about these natty issues that we're trying to navigate our way through, at some point veers off into a conversation, or not even veers off, at the epicenter of that dialogue is a conversation that must be had about privatization. So here you come now talking about the care industry, and your book is calling it the highest stage of capitalism, and at the epicenter of this conversation is the issue of privatization. Talk to me about that part, as we say.
Yeah. So, as you started off in your opening, Tavis, you talked about care as the work we do to take care of one another, to nurture one another, to love one another. But in fact, what we have right now in this country is inequity in care because our care system, our ability to find child care or health care is rooted in a privatized capitalist economy. And I would argue we have a two-tiered system of, actually more like a 3 or a 4-tiered system of care, right? Mm-hmm. So what privatization has done is it has created a system where some people are cared for and some people are not cared for. So you can look at the very well off. They have access to lots of services and support. If you take a company like Google, for example, mm-hmm. they have very generous benefits for their employees. On-site child care. They offer something like child bonding bucks to help with the cost of a newborn baby, diapers and formula, things like that. Google employees get 18 weeks of paid family leave. Now, not everyone works at Google, right? Things are tough, a little tougher for the middle class. They have some support because they still can't afford to purchase child care services in the marketplace. The working class has a very hard time, right? So we do have certain policies in place as a country. We have the the Family Medical Leave Act, for example. You cannot take advantage of that unless you have the means, the resources, because it does not offer you any financial support. The FMLA allows you to take time off for health care reasons or to take care of a sick relative, but it doesn't compensate you in terms of your salary. So you could only do that if you're making enough money or if your employer offers those benefits. On the other hand, the very poorest sectors of our country have nothing because most of the care benefits, if we look, for example, even something like the child tax credit, which was expanded during the pandemic, was a really important benefit because what it did is it gave people money who had children to help them cover the costs of having a child. But that is a tax credit, right? And so most of our programs are tax credits. So if you're not earning very much or if you're not earning anything, you actually don't get any benefits from that. And so we have a sector of our population that is hurting, and that is hurting very, very badly. There's 40 million Americans in this country who live in poverty, and 1.5 million people live in what is known as extreme poverty today. Extreme poverty, meaning that they live on less than just a few dollars a day. And I think we have to ask ourselves, why is that? Why is it? I think it has to do with this very question you're raising about privatization and what impact it has.
I want to talk in a moment here about this issue that you're raising that I think is about the poor, the extreme poor, which I think in the context of this conversation about care is connected because I think there's a conversation to be had about the devaluation and low pay of care workers who tend to be people of color in a lot of these communities. So we'll talk about that, I promise, in a moment. But you said something else I want to come to right quick, and that is this multi-tiered system that we have when it comes to care in this country. You said 2, then you said maybe 3 or 4. It's multi-tiered by any other definition. There was a moment in this country, and years ago when I started my career, it seems there was a greater dialogue about what was then referred to as the common good, the public good. And nowadays, you hear so little about the common good, about the public good. It's been replaced, to my mind, by a new framework of the rich and the rest of us. It ain't about the common good no more. It's about the rich and the rest of us. This again, to your point, this multi-tiered system that we now live in, which raises the question for me about the universality of care in this country. Put another way, care is often understood as something that connects us. It's universal. We care for each other. I get the sense in reading your book that very notion of caring for each other, am I my brother's keeper, my sister's keeper, that whole notion has been turned on its head.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. I think, and we saw this during the pandemic. There were a lot of conversations, a lot of articles written about the importance of care, the value of care for our society as a whole, about how we should all be invested in care. We all need care. We all care for someone else. And it's rhetoric that makes us feel good, but it's not based in any kind of reality about how our society works. And in fact, one of the most interesting things to me about that conversation during the pandemic was how care workers were often seen as important only because they provided a service to middle-class people or upper-class people who needed their help, right?
They were called essential then, the essential workers. Yeah, they were essential then.
Actually,
yeah, sure.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. Essential for whom and why, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And so, and a related question to that is, well, what if somebody is not an essential worker? Do they matter? Do their lives matter? Should we be taking care of them? Who's included or not included in this category of the universal or the we, or who's a part of our caring community? And I think a lot of people are left out, and I think we have to face that fact.
So let me ask you this for about 90 seconds to go. We'll start and continue when we come forward. What then does care look like these days? How are you? I could have asked this question to begin this dialogue. How are you defining care these days?
Well, I think care is all the work that sustains us day to day, that allows us to live, that allows us to thrive. It is often associated with traditionally women's work, household labor. It includes food service, so I would include the restaurant industry in that. Childcare, education, nursing. I think all of these are industries that allow us to live day to day, allow us, the organization in New York called Domestic Workers United that I have worked with for many years, refers to this as the work that makes all other work possible, right? And we saw this during the pandemic again. This is the work that if we did not have child care workers, if we do not have health care, we would not be able to function and go to work ourselves.
No, it's a powerful statement, and I received that. Her name is Pramila Natterson. I'm Tavis Smiley. Her book is called Care, The Highest Stage of Capitalism. A great deal more to talk about when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
What's up, party people? It's your favorite MC's favorite rapper, MC Light here. And we're celebrating 50 years of hip-hop, authentically powered by Cadillac. And we're going to take it way back to where it started. It was only fitting that hip-hop began with teenagers at a back-to-school jam in the rec room of a South Bronx apartment complex by an 18-year-old brother. By the way, I'm also sure he had a Cadillac parked outside. He noticed the energy on the dance floor when he switched between two turntables, extending the beats, repeating the breaks, and never losing the rhythms. And that was the birth of hip-hop. And from that moment, it took off.
For more on how Cadillac is celebrating hip-hop's 50th, visit Cadillac.com/audacity.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Mark Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Trump family members are set to begin testifying this week in the New York Trump Organization civil fraud trial. Donald Trump Jr. is expected to take the stand either today or tomorrow, followed by Eric Trump, Ivanka Trump, and finally, former President Donald Trump. In Pennsylvania, a Philadelphia man has been chosen as the winning designer for a new Harriet Tubman statue. Alvin Pettit won out over 4 other semi-finalists with his depiction titled A Higher Power, The Call for a Freedom Fighter. Pettit is African-American. His nearly 14-foot bronze statue, the first of a black woman historical figure to be included in Philadelphia's public art collection, will portray Tubman as a military leader. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network and BINnews.com.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. If you're like many people, you may think custom blinds is a job for expensive professionals. Well, at Blindster, if you have a tape measure and a screwdriver, you can install our custom blinds and save big. Plus, we guarantee they'll fit. Blindster.com.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
I'm a bad man. The Clippers beat Orlando by 16 last night at Crypto.com. 27 points and 7 assists for Paul George. James Harden was in the building. He watched the game from a luxury suite. Harden is expected to make his Clippers debut on Monday against the Knicks in New York. He'll be a spectator again tonight when the Clippers and Lakers meet up at Crypto, 7 p.m. tip-off on ESPN. Congratulations to Lakers legend Magic Johnson. According to Forbes magazine, Magic has reached billionaire status. Magic's net worth is a reported $1.2 billion. Magic joins LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and Tiger Woods in the billionaire club. LeBron became a billionaire in 2022. Magic's numerous business investments include part ownership of the Dodgers, the LA Sparks, and the NFL Washington Commanders. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
This is KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the Voice of Reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the Voice of Reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Some people won't give you the real talk on drugs, but it's time we know the facts. Fentanyl is killing people. It's a powerful opioid, often made illegally and commonly mixed with illicit drugs. It can even be pressed into counterfeit pills that resemble prescription medications. Just 2 milligrams, about the size of a few grains of sand, could potentially be lethal. This isn't an ad to scare you, but it is an ad to make you think twice. Get the facts. Go to realdealonfentanyl.com. This message is brought to you by the Ad Council.
Thinking about hosting a podcast and don't know where to start? Morris Media Studios has you covered. We're a professional podcast and voiceover studio located in Leimert Park. We specialize in recording and live streaming audio and video podcasts. Let us help you set up, record, and distribute your podcast. Hosting a podcast is a great way to bring awareness to your business, product, or good cause. For more info, visit morrismediastudios.com or give us a call at 323-815-4204.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
Tavis Smiley and Pramila Natterson, who is professor of history at Barnard College and author of the book Care, The Highest Stage of Capitalism. In case you've just tuned in, we are talking about the care industry in this country and what's really driving it. And it ain't CARE, it's CASH. And it's about the cash and more than it is about the care these days. And she has a pretty transparent indictment of care as we presently know it. And we are continuing our conversation in that regard. Professor Natterson, let me ask you, when, and I don't know, you can put your finger specifically on a moment, you tell me, but when did this thing turn for the worse? I mean, there's always been money in the care industry, but what you lay out is a pretty ugly scenario. And is there a particular moment when we just got really greedy and care became about cash?
I think it began in the 1970s and 1980s, and we saw a real shift in that period, especially with the dismantling of social programs. So I think there is a connection between the dismantling of welfare and the declining social supports that we've seen, the disinvestment in public schools. The shift to a more privatized economy begins in the 1970s, and it accelerates in the 1980s and then in the 1990s. We've seen a shift away from tax dollars spent on taking care of people towards the carceral state, for example. And along with that, we've seen the privatization increase. So I think that the 1980s and the 1990s were really critical in the rise of the care industry. And, we could just look at some statistics again, because I think the part of the argument I'm making is not just that care is privatized, but that care as a profit-making industry is more and more important to the U.S. economy. So, for example, if we look at the number of manufacturing workers, in 1979, 22% of American workers were in manufacturing. Today, it's 8%. In healthcare, it was 8% 40 years ago, is now 15%, so it's nearly doubled. The top 10 Fortune 500 companies in the U.S. today, of the top 10, 4 are in the care economy. In 1980, it was 6 oil and gas, 2 electronics, and 2 auto. So we have seen a real shift in how the U.S. economy functions away from manufacturing towards things like social services and care. And this is important because it suggests to us not just that we as individuals are spending more money on care, we are, but this is how American capitalism runs today. It runs because of our need to spend money on health care and education and things like that.
Yep. You said something a moment ago that you sort of slid by, and I heard it, and I'm sure the audience did. I want to go back and pick it up right quick, because particularly for this audience, I think it's worth spending a few more moments on, and that is this shift, as you put it, in the care economy to the carceral state. That's a nice term, but let's break that down for everyday people and explain what you really mean by that.
Yeah, it was a shift away. So in the 1930s, as a result of the Great Depression and protests and organizing, we had the creation of something called the New Deal welfare state. Unemployment insurance, minimum wage, the Social Security system, the welfare system, all of that was created in the 1930s as part of the New Deal. Now, don't get me wrong, there was a lot of inequity there. There was a lot of racial exclusion in the welfare state. Nevertheless, it provided a kind of a basic safety net for many people in this country. In the 1960s, we see an expansion of that with things like food stamps and Medicare and Medicaid. Beginning in the 1970s and the 1980s, there's a shift away from providing that kind of economic and social supports for people towards a more punitive approach. That's when the drug laws are first passed. That's when you begin to see more investment in police and policing, more investment in surveillance. And so there is, in fact, a real shift away from social supports towards policing and incarceration as a solution to social problems. And I would argue that even now the welfare system is much more of a surveillance and policing mechanism than it is one that actually seeks to provide support for poor families. And there have been proposals for things like fingerprinting welfare recipients or drug testing welfare recipients. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that the case? Why is it that a poor family who needs assistance needs to have a drug test or fingerprints taken? Right? And so we've seen this question of surveillance and policing and carcerality, I think, intervene in the way even social support and social services are administered.
All of that leads me right to this question. Tina Turner asked, what's love got to do with it? So I ask, what's race got to do with it? We're talking about care, and again, you call it the highest stage of capitalism. You're tiptoeing up to it. I want to go straight there. So what's race got to do with all this?
Race has got everything to do with it. So when I mention those various tiers of care, who has access to care and who doesn't have access to care, those are racialized categories, right? So the people who are better off, the people who have access to a privatized economy, who have good health care benefits from their employers, who have child bonding bucks from their employers, those tend to be white, very privileged workers. And the people at the very bottom, the people in the bottom tier, are largely black and brown people, are largely immigrants, are people who don't have the same kinds of access to resources. So race is very central to both the structure of who gets care and who doesn't get care. And the vast majority of care workers who are underpaid, most care workers don't have health care. They don't have Social Security. They don't have minimum wage, right? And some of these laws are on the books, but they might be undocumented. They might not know how to get that if they're working as independent contractors, so to speak. They don't know how to file for that. And there's a tremendous amount of exploitation in the care industry.
So how much of this greed in the care system has to do with the devaluation and low pay of these oftentimes people of color workers?
It has a lot to do with it. So certainly I think there's been a devaluation of both unpaid household care, because that's the other piece of it, right, is that there are many people in this country who are doing this work for themselves, for their families, and are not getting paid for it. You know, the elderly parents who, you know, are living with their children or disabled people, and they can't afford institutionalized care, can't afford to hire someone. So there's all that unpaid care work. There is a devaluation of care work in this country for sure, and that does impact what workers are paid. But I think we cannot disentangle that from race. Because, in fact, if we look at wages vis-a-vis race, whether or not someone is working in the home as a care worker or working in an industry as a care worker, there are differentials in how people are paid based on their race and their gender. So I don't think it's only a question of the devaluation of care. I think it's also a question of the devaluation of the labor of black and brown people and black and brown women in particular.
Yep. As you were talking, I thought about this summer of strikes that we just went through, and now this season of strikes that continues. UAW, big victory the other day, got all three automakers defined to get in line. There have been other successes. The Writers Guild closed their deal. Actors still out on strike. But I thought about Kaiser Permanente. We talked about that on this program a couple weeks ago when they were striking, 75,000 of them across the country striking at Kaiser Permanente. And part of what they were saying was that, you know, this notion that we were essential workers during the pandemic just sort of went out the window. But let's tell you the backstory for how these so-called essential workers are being treated or maltreated, as it were, and hence they're going out on strike. So they got sick of that flowery language, calling these persons essential workers, but the backstory for how they were being treated and underpaid and overworked finally reared its ugly head, and so they went out on strike. And fortunately for them, that strike issue got resolved. There's a disconnect between, again, this beautiful flowery language of calling them essential workers, but the way we treat them or maltreat them is a very different story. And a lot of that comes to light in this book by Pramila Natterson called Care, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. So she said earlier that what she's really aiming to get in this book is the hope and the possibility for how we fix this. So we've talked about the problem, so I'm going to grant her wish to talk about hope and possibility. And she's going to tell us where she finds that when we come forward on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Turning my pain into purpose is pretty much what I have done to start this foundation.
In August 2020, after the death of George Floyd, Bridget Floyd and other family members established the George Floyd Memorial Foundation in support of the Black community.
It's going to take more than just us as a foundation. It's going to take the community, the world, to make a change.
Fight for racial justice for the Black community. Learn how at lovehasnolabels.com. Brought to you by Love Has No Labels and the Ad Council.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles is a nonprofit law firm that protects and advances the rights of the most underserved, leveling the playing field and ensuring that everyone can have access to the justice system. Every year, LAFLA provides free, high-quality legal services to more than 100,000 people living in poverty across greater Los Angeles. Their unique combination of neighborhood offices, self-help centers at courthouses, and domestic violence clinics puts Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles on the front lines in vulnerable communities and at the forefront of change. LAFLA's expert team of attorneys, paralegals, and support staff works to provide direct representation, offer counsel and advice, provide referrals, and educate the community about their legal rights through workshops and seminars. With locations all over LA, you can access their services or volunteer to help no matter where you live. And if you have an urgent issue, call 213-235-0060. That's 213-235-0060. To get legal help, make a donation, or volunteer, visit lafla.org. lafla.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
May Fresh Daily in Leimert Park, Los Angeles, California. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Programming note here, I should have mentioned this earlier, but it just occurs to me now. Tomorrow, great show. Well, we try to do a great show every day, but tomorrow, especially great show, I think. Tomorrow is the 40th anniversary, believe it or not, of the day that Ronald Reagan signed the King Holiday Bill into law. He protested. He fought. He did not want to do that. But eventually he had no choice, and Ronald Reagan signed the King Holiday Bill into law. We were talking earlier about Dr. King in this program today. But tomorrow, the 4th anniversary of Reagan signing that bill in the Rose Garden at the White House. And we got an all-star lineup tomorrow. Not just about that, but that and some other stuff. So we got some great guests tomorrow. Brianna Joy Gray is here tomorrow. Michael Eric Dyson, the M to the E to the D, is here tomorrow. Nikki Giovanni is here tomorrow. So a great show lined up tomorrow with some great conversations. That's tomorrow's show. We continue this day's show and this hour's conversation with Pramila Nadesan, professor of history at Barnard College. Her book is called Care, The Highest Stage of Capitalism. And so now we move to that hope and possibility, Professor Nadesan, that you wanted to get to. So get to it.
So I will just say the long-term goal is to abolish the profit-oriented care economy.
Oh, Lord.
So no one should be making money off of someone else's disability, their pain, disease, crisis, hunger, or housing insecurity. Bottom line, right? And that is the system we have now. And the question is, which you're asking is, how do we get there, right?
Yes. That is the question.
So I think that, it's not an easy answer. I don't have all the answers for this. I'm just going to talk about some of what I've seen over the past few years. And one is during the pandemic, we saw many, many examples of what I call collective care or communal care, where in the midst of this really unprecedented crisis for this country, for this world, people stepped up and took care of one another. In my neighborhood, there was a friendly fridge. There was my upstairs neighbor gathered food from various places, stocked the fridge. When people needed food to eat, they would go there. There were lots of mutual aid efforts. So I think we witnessed the amazing capacity and care of people to help one another. And that sustains our communities. That's extremely important. There were organizations. I work with a group in New York, a migrant worker organization. They collected care packages and handed them out. Now, that is not a long-term solution. That is a stopgap measure. We've also seen organizing, and I think that's another piece of it. The UAW strike, which you mentioned a short while ago, is certainly one important victory.
Sure.
But I think we have to move out of a mindset of union organizing and think about working class organizing or.
No, let me ask. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Well, I'll do it when I come forward. No matter how much we shift our mindset, I'm just thinking as you're talking, and you admitted you don't have all the answers, and I think the end game, the goal is, you and I are simpatico in that regard. I agree on the goal. What I'm thinking about is the resistance that we are going to come up against when we try to deal with this issue of profit extraction. I mean, they're in this for a reason. As I said, it ain't about the care for them, it's about the cash. And you're going to be met with a lot of resistance when you try to zero sum this thing out. We'll talk about that in our remaining moments. You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
Can you dig it? Come on!
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
We're celebrating 1 year of the K. From checking out the vibrant art and diverse dining in Leimert Park to cheering on your favorite team in Inglewood, you can choose your own adventure when you ride the Metro K-Line. Leave the car at home and go Metro. Visit metro.net/K-Line.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment. LA's 99 neighborhood councils form the grassroots level of the Los Angeles city government. The system was created to connect LA's diverse communities to City Hall. While neighborhood council board members are volunteers, they are also public officials elected to office by the members of their community. Neighborhood councils advocate on issues like homelessness, housing, land use, emergency preparedness, public safety, parks, transportation, and sustainability. They also provide local expertise on the delivery of city services to their various communities. Neighborhood councils are open to participation by anyone who is a part of the fabric of daily life in said community. This includes those who live, work, or own property or a business. If you are interested in stepping up to join your local neighborhood council, visit www.empowerla.org. That's empowerla.org. It's time to think globally, but act locally. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
Let's get back to more of this rich dialogue with Tavis Smiley.
About 3 minutes left here, Professor Nadesan. So I love the end game, and yet I'm thinking, as we spend a good amount of our time in this hour talking about the care industry, and part of our indictment of it is that it's been so privatized, what you call profit extraction. You start messing with that, it's going to be some serious resistance.
Absolutely. But I think we have to move to a system of a guaranteed annual income for people, right? Mm-hmm. Because we're encountering a lot of problems. You look at the violence that happened in Maine more recently. That's just one example of all kinds of gun violence. There's an opioid crisis. There's a housing crisis. There's a health care crisis. People are not feeling safe. We don't feel good about the country we live in right now. And I think it's in all of our interests to find a solution where there is, in fact, security, where there is, in fact, health care. It will do us all good. Perhaps corporations are going to lose out, yes. Perhaps the very rich are going to lose out, yes. I think it's a question of the vast majority of us versus the small minority who are benefiting from this system. And I think we have to organize. I really do. I think we have to organize as workers and as ordinary people to fight for something different. That's how change has been made historically, and I think that's how change is going to be made in the future.
I could have presented this question at the outset of our dialogue, but it works just as well as the exit question. And that is when you name a book Care, the highest stage of capitalism, why of all the industries in this country do you refer to care as the highest stage of capitalism?
Because I think care is increasingly the way corporations and rich people in this country are trying to make money. And I think it affects each of us very, very deeply around the things that mean the most to us. And so in a sense, I think it's the most important issue facing us right now as people, as people who are living here in the United States. I think we have to make a change because care is fundamentally, it should be about the love and the nurture and the families and the communities that you mentioned at the outset. And I don't think it shouldn't be for sale.
Yeah. In the last 30 seconds then, how, given all the realities that you detail and unpack in this book, how are you sustaining your hope these days?
I'm sustaining my hope when I talk to the ordinary grassroots folks who I work with on a day-to-day basis, the migrant workers, the welfare recipients. I work with groups in Mississippi, the Mississippi Low-Income Child Care Initiative. They're doing really amazing work against really difficult circumstances, and when I see how they're able to come together, I feel much more hopeful about what we can do.
I thank you for this conversation. I thank you for your work and your witness. Her name is Pernilla Nadesan, and professor of history at Barnard College. And the book is called Care, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Professor Nadesan, good to have you on this program, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much, Tavis.
More of Tavis Smiley when we come forward.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Trump family members are set to begin testifying this week in the New York Trump Organization civil fraud trial. Donald Trump Jr. is expected to take the stand either today or tomorrow, followed by Eric Trump, Ivanka Trump, and finally, former President Donald Trump. In Pennsylvania,